Dr. Lena Montgomery was the kind of woman people described with reverence. At 38, she had already built a sterling career as a trauma surgeon in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. She was brilliant in the operating room, fierce in her charity work, and adored by patients and peers alike. Her compassion could soften even the most hardened ER nurses. But it wasn't just her skill that people admired, it was her poise. Lena carried herself with a quiet strength, the kind that came from surviving more than she ever let on. And yet, for all her accomplishments, Lena had one glaring absence in her life: love. She had tried dating in med school, half-heartedly. She had been too busy building her career to entertain casual romance. By the time she hit her mid-30s, she had resigned herself to the idea that maybe marriage wasn't in the cards for her. That is, until she met Pastor Gabriel Quinn. Gabriel, 42, was the kind of man who could fill a room with his presence alone. Charismatic, clean-cut, and relentlessly righteous, he led one of South Florida's fastest-growing megachurches. His sermons were streamed across the country. His messages about morality, purity, and godliness attracted both praise and controversy. But no one could deny that he had presence. To his congregation, Pastor Quinn was a man of unshakable conviction, someone who had remained celibate into his 40s, waiting for a woman he could truly call his equal in both spirit and discipline. Their meeting was a collision of two worlds. It happened at a charity fundraiser hosted by a Christian medical missions board. Lena had been invited as a keynote speaker. Gabriel had come to bless the event. When their eyes met across the crowded banquet hall, something stirred in both of them. A stillness, a recognition. Lena had never been particularly religious, but she found herself drawn to his calm intensity. And Gabriel, well, he believed it was fate. Their courtship was whirlwind. 6 months of prayer meetings, chaste dinners, and long discussions about purpose and purity. Gabriel insisted on no physical contact, not even a kiss. Lena found it old-fashioned but charming. For the first time in years, someone saw her heart before her body. In front of their friends, family, and followers, Gabriel proposed on stage during a Sunday sermon, holding Lena's hand in front of 2,000 cheering churchgoers. She said yes, tears streaming down her face. They were married 3 months later in a grand ceremony. Stained glass windows, gospel choirs, white doves released into the Florida sky. It was a fairy tale, scripted and blessed. But the honeymoon would last less than 24 hours, because behind Gabriel's quiet eyes was a man who believed God spoke to him in absolutes. And behind Lena's brilliant smile was a secret she'd kept locked away, one she chose to share only after they'd said, "I do." What happened in that hotel suite on the 17th floor of the Seaside Grand wasn't a lover's quarrel. It wasn't newlywed nerves. By sunrise, the bride would be dead. The pastor would be in handcuffs. And the story he would tell, to police, to his lawyers, to God, would be one so bizarre, so unfathomable, it would grip the nation. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a storm waiting to be unleashed. The Seaside Grand was everything Gabriel Quinn had asked for. Towering over the Fort Lauderdale shoreline, its honeymoon suite offered a panoramic view of the Atlantic. Ocean breeze through French doors, champagne on ice, roses on the bed. A room built for a beginning. But as Pastor Gabriel stood at the window that night, freshly showered, dressed in a white robe, watching the waves lap gently against the sand, he felt off. He had waited for this night his whole life. He had preached about it. Purity, discipline, marriage, the union between a man and a woman, sacred before God. He had told his congregation that a righteous man waits, and God rewards that patience with clarity, peace, and the kind of intimacy only found in Holy Covenant. And yet, Gabriel's hands trembled. Lena stepped out of the bathroom behind him. She was radiant, her hair down, wearing a soft silk nightgown, her face free of makeup for the first time he had ever seen. She looked younger somehow, more human. She smiled, nervous but open. "I know we've waited," she said, voice light, like she was trying to break the tension. "But I want this to be right, not just for you, for me too." Gabriel turned to face her, nodding. He stepped forward, slowly, taking her hand, but the moment he did, something shifted. A scent, barely noticeable at first, but it caught in his throat. He tried to ignore it. It must be nerves, anticipation. But no, it was distinct, heavy, fleshy, acrid. It hit him like static in his nostrils. His smile faded. His body recoiled without meaning to. Lena saw it. Her smile dropped. Her hands slowly pulled back. "Gabriel," she asked, "what's wrong?" He didn't answer. He stepped away, turned back to the window, clutching the edge of the sill, breathing slowly, fighting something primal inside him. Lena hesitated, then walked toward the bed, sat down, and exhaled sharply. "I guess I should have told you this earlier," she said, "but I didn't know how." Gabriel didn't turn. "I wasn't always like this. The person you know. I've had a past." Now he turned, slowly. "I mean, we all do," he said. "But what are you talking about?" She looked down, picked at a string on her nightgown. Her voice was soft, nearly a whisper. "I've had issues, medical ones, from years ago. Infections, reconstructive surgeries. I didn't think they'd matter once we were married, but I guess I hoped love would cover it." Gabriel's face hardened. "I'm not talking about infections, Lena. I'm talking about truth." She looked up at him, her eyes wet. "Gabriel, my past. It's not what you think. I wasn't always this version of myself. I've been with people, a lot of people. Some reckless choices, some I regret, some I don't. I thought you should know." The silence in the room pressed against the walls like water in a tank ready to crack. "How many?" Gabriel asked. Lena hesitated. "Do numbers matter?" "How many, Lena?" She swallowed. "More than 40. Maybe more than 60. I didn't count. It was another life." Gabriel didn't shout. He didn't move. But something in his eyes shifted. A kind of blankness, like a man staring through glass at a version of himself he no longer recognized. "You waited to tell me until now?" he said, his voice eerily calm. "I thought if you saw who I am now—" "I did," he interrupted, "and now I don't know who that is." She reached out to him, trembling, but Gabriel took a step back, then another. "I can't do this," he said. "Gabriel, I want a divorce." The words dropped between them like thunder. Lena stood slowly, stunned. "Wait. What?" "I'm not staying in this room. I'm not staying in this marriage. Not another minute." Lena's eyes burned. Her voice rose. "You don't get to leave. Not after everything I gave up. Not after today." Gabriel turned for the door, and that's when she lunged, not violently but desperately, grabbing his arm, spinning him back. That was the moment everything broke. And by morning, one of them would be dead. The hotel room, once filled with candlelight and petals, now pulsed with something else. Tension so thick it curled at the edges of the air, tightening with every breath. Gabriel's hand was already on the doorknob when Lena grabbed his arm. Her fingers dug into his forearm, not in rage, but desperation, like she was trying to stop a dam from breaking with bare hands. "Gabriel, wait, please," she begged, her voice cracking. But Gabriel had gone cold. She wasn't just a stranger to him now. She was a fraud. A lie dressed in white lace. The perfect woman he had married yesterday had vanished, replaced with someone who had betrayed the very foundation of everything he believed in. His ministry, his message, his faith. "Don't touch me," he muttered, trying to shake her off. But Lena clung tighter. "You don't understand. I didn't lie to you. I just didn't tell you, because I needed to believe I was more than that. I am more than that." "You should have told me before I put that ring on your finger," Gabriel growled. "You should have told me before you stood at the altar and let me vow my life to you under false pretenses." "False pretenses?" she snapped, suddenly emboldened. "You think I tricked you? I loved you. I still do. And I thought that maybe, just maybe, you loved me enough to accept that I had a past." He turned, eyes like knives. "You should have been honest. You knew what I stood for. You knew what kind of man I was, what kind of God I serve." Lena's face contorted, no longer pleading, now trembling with a slow-building rage. "You serve an image, a sermon. You think purity is perfection. But real people, we bleed, we break, we have scars." Gabriel's voice lowered, icy. "I could have accepted scars. What I can't accept is rot beneath the skin." The slap came fast. A sharp crack echoed through the room as Lena's hand met Gabriel's face. His head turned slightly with the impact, his breath frozen in his chest. She stared at him, horrified by what she had done. But it was too late. Gabriel's chest rose with slow, controlled breath. The fire in his eyes wasn't rage. It was betrayal turned feral. "Don't you ever touch me again," he said. "Then don't you ever talk to me like I'm filth," Lena spat, tears streaking her face now, rage and heartbreak battling in her voice. Gabriel moved toward her, not to strike, but to get past her. He needed air, distance, sanity. He needed out. But Lena stepped in front of the door again. "You walk out of here, Gabriel, and you destroy everything," she said, her voice trembling. "You ruin both of us." "I'd rather ruin us than live this lie," he growled. And then something broke. Not in the room, but in Lena. Maybe it was the weight of rejection, the public pressure, the humiliating truth she had finally shared, the fear of what Gabriel could do to her reputation, her career, her life. Or maybe it was just heartbreak, unfiltered, raw, and raging. She grabbed his wrist again. He yanked it free. She went to grab him again. He shoved her back. She stumbled, just a step, but it was enough. Her heel clipped the edge of the plush rug, and she lost her footing. Her head struck the nightstand with a sickening crack. Everything stopped. Gabriel froze. The rage drained from his face in an instant, replaced by something far worse. Terror. "Lena," he whispered. She didn't respond. Blood began to spread across the white carpet beneath her head, a deep crimson halo. Gabriel dropped to his knees. "Lena?" He touched her shoulder, shook her gently. Still nothing. And in that moment, the pastor who had spent his life preaching salvation realized he had just stepped into damnation. The honeymoon suite was silent, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning, a mechanical breath in a room where life had just been violently torn away. Gabriel didn't move at first. He sat there on the floor, cradling Lena's head in his lap, her blood soaking into the fabric of his pants, into his hands, into his soul. His mouth was open, trembling, but no sound came out. The scripture he had once memorized felt foreign now. All the words he had spoken about redemption and righteousness rang hollow in the stale air of that hotel room. His bride, the woman he had married less than 24 hours ago, was dead. and he had put her there. He tried CPR. He whispered prayers. He begged God, out loud, tears running down his face, to take it back, to give her one more breath, to wake her up. But nothing changed. Lena's eyes never opened, and at some point, a strange numbness took over. A calm, clinical detachment that felt like it belonged to someone else. With shaking hands, Gabriel reached for the hotel phone. 911, said the voice on the other end. My wife. She fell. She hit her head, Gabriel said, his voice flat, distant. I think she's dead. When the paramedics arrived 15 minutes later, they found a man soaked in blood, kneeling in a prayer position over a lifeless body. One look at Lena told them everything they needed to know. The gash above her temple, the broken lamp on the floor, the bloody edge of the nightstand. It was no ordinary accident. "Sir, step back from the body," one of them ordered. Gabriel obeyed, slowly, mechanically. The medics checked Lena's pulse, her pupils, her breath, and then shook their heads. Time of death, 11:42 p.m. As they zipped her body into the bag, Gabriel finally broke. He collapsed into the wall, sobbing, the sound raw and broken, like something ancient cracking open. That's how the police found him. Slumped in a corner, rocking slightly, a Bible still on the nightstand next to a bloodied wine glass. When they asked what happened, Gabriel told them the truth, at least his version of it. "She told me things I couldn't live with. I tried to leave. She tried to stop me. There was a struggle. I pushed her." "Pushed her?" the detective asked. "She fell. Hit her head." "Did you intend to harm her?" Gabriel didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know any more. All he remembered was the betrayal, the fury, the moment everything inside him went silent, except for the voice screaming, "This isn't the woman you thought you married." He was handcuffed at 12:08 a.m. As they walked him through the hallway of the hotel, guests peered out of their rooms, some in robes, others in shock, whispering behind cracked doors. The pastor who had married a judge was now a suspect in her murder. In the back of the squad car, Gabriel sat in silence, wrists bound, wedding ring still on his finger. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the rear window, casting flickers of guilt across his face. He didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't demand bail, didn't say it was an accident. He just kept whispering to himself, the same two words over and over again. She lied. And outside, in the city that once looked to him for guidance, the headlines were already writing themselves. Pastor arrested after wife found dead on wedding night. What had begun as a celebration of union had now become the first chapter in a tragedy too twisted for even the boldest of sermons. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back rows, their pens scratching feverishly as the prosecutor laid out the story. A respected pastor, a federal judge, a wedding night that ended in blood, and a confession that left the city gasping. At the center of it all sat Gabriel Waverly, once a man of God, now a man on trial. He looked smaller in court, not just physically, but spiritually. The charisma was gone, the fire in his sermons extinguished. The robe had been traded for an orange jumpsuit, and his Bible, always clutched like a sword in church, now sat untouched on the defendant's table, like a relic from a life that no longer existed. As the prosecution spoke, the jury watched with quiet horror. This was not an accident, the DA declared. This was a man who couldn't reconcile fantasy with reality. A man who, when faced with the truth, chose violence over understanding. He didn't see his wife. He saw a stain on his purity. And for that, he killed her. The defense tried to paint a different picture. They argued that Gabriel had been provoked, that he had been psychologically unprepared for what unfolded that night, that he had panicked, that it was never murder, only a fatal mistake. But the evidence was damning. The autopsy confirmed the trauma was severe, the force behind her fall not consistent with a mere shove. There were bruises on her wrists, the shape of his palm across her arm, the shattered glass beside her head, and most of all, his own confession. I told her I wanted a divorce. She refused. I pushed her. It took the jury 6 hours. On May 9, 2024, Gabriel Waverly was found guilty of manslaughter. The courtroom held its breath as the judge spoke. "Mr. Waverly, your words once brought people comfort, clarity, hope. But on that night, your actions did the opposite. You allowed pride, rage, and disappointment to blind you. You did not just kill your wife. You broke every oath you ever preached. You failed her, your faith, and the flock that followed you. You are hereby sentenced to 20 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 15. Gabriel blinked, once, then lowered his head. There were no cries, no gasps, no protests from the gallery. Just a quiet sigh from the congregation that had once called him pastor. Back in Houston, New Light Baptist Church tried to carry on. For weeks, the pulpit stood empty. The front pew, once reserved for the First Lady, remained unoccupied. A silent monument to the woman who had dreamed of balancing justice and faith in a single life. Her name was never spoken aloud during services. The stained glass that bore an inscription of the couple's wedding date was quietly removed. Eventually, a new pastor came, but the shadow remained, and every now and then, during communion, when the choir sang, "Create in me a clean heart, O God," a few would turn toward the empty space by the altar and remember. In prison, Gabriel began preaching again, not to a congregation of the righteous, but to a circle of the broken, men with regrets, with blood on their hands, with secrets that haunted them. He spoke softly now. No more fire, no more pride, just a man with too much time and too many memories. He never remarried, never saw the inside of a church again. And as the years passed, people stopped asking, how could he? Instead, they began to whisper another question. What does a man do when the thing he loved most dies by his own hand? That was the sermon Gabriel Waverly would preach for the rest of his life. Alone, behind bars, to a God who, for the first time, said nothing back.